For more information about upcoming episodes, to drop a suggestion, or anything in between, visit www.historyshortspodcast.com/HTTP. Or you can look for us on Facebook at History Teachers Talking Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to the show. New episodes drop the 13th of every month. History Teachers Talking is part of the History Shorts Network. Now back to the show. This is Peter,
And this is Tom.
and you're listening to History Teachers Talking Podcast. All right, this is Peter Zablocki and Tom Reszka, and welcome
Hello.
back to the show. All right,
You're back.
part two today.
Part two.
Part two. Yes, events that made America. And as if just a reminder for those of you that perhaps haven't really seen any of the other ones or heard any of the well over 100 episodes
Yeah,
that
come
are
on.
now
Get
on
on that.
YouTube.
Get on that.
Get on that. But we prepare for this separately, if you could call it preparing. We've taught most of these topics over the years many times. That's what a lot of people don't realize. When you're, I teach college now, but the information was more readily available for me when I was a high school teacher because I had to teach the same thing 3 or 4 times a day sometimes. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, that
over and over and
repetition
over.
helps.
So yeah, by fourth block, I'm like just spitting from memory. Versus college, I have to sometimes prepare a little bit more in the sense that I have to remind myself because the last time I taught this particular lesson was a semester ago, right? So I teach something once every 4 months or something like that, right? Or even twice, you might say, in a year, versus I teach it 4 times a day if I'm teaching high school or middle school for that matter. But yeah, a lot of these things we know we didn't really
Absolutely.
prepare together. We kind of come at this with our own um,
We have
you
our own
know,
little list and we kind of just
lists.
go with it,
Yeah.
play by ear, see what happens.
So
We're gonna miss some stuff because, like we said, this is 125 years worth of history. We're trying to
that's
find
right.
just 10 major events in this time. So there's gonna be some that are gonna not be there.
Yeah. And there's gonna be some angry emails that I missed some stuff. We were just talking about it a little bit, and my thing was I think your first one started with for part two was the Spanish American War, right? But
Yeah.
I go a little earlier and more domestic, and mine was the Haymarket Affair. So basically, what we're talking about is labor unrest ultimately, and this event showcases the tension between labor and the ownership of industry and where government stands in that line. There was a shooting at a McCormick harvesting machine plant company where police officers wind up striking and killing a couple people. So another uprising, or you might say, I guess uprising,
Yeah, it
is
was an
called up.
uprising. They were upset.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's called up
it
at the
was up.
Haymarket Square for the next day to protest these killings. And then someone, to this day, we don't know who, throws a bomb into this commotion. 7 police officers are killed, and I think at least 4 civilians are killed as well. But then police opens fire at the protesters, killing even more. And it's become the defining symbol of the Gilded Age conflict of capital versus labor, ultimately. You're looking at this idea of, well, who is government going to protect? Is the government going to protect the worker or is the government going to protect the capital? Obviously, the government steps in and protects the business ownership and industry because that's important for the well being of the country. But this is an important event going forward, I think, because of the fact that everything kind of stems from this. These guys were really what they wanted in the first place. Why McCormick happened and why the Haymarket happened was because they wanted an 8-hour workday. So from this point forward, to avoid bloodshed, there is always a little bit of push and pull when it comes to labor and capital.
Work for a lot of like modern day unions happens with this, the
Yeah.
Haymarket riots. A lot of times it's called too, and it really puts those in place. And it's an important part of history because the labor unions are such powerful
Yeah.
forces in the United States, and in how powerful you want the labor unions to be. But sometimes they become too powerful, right? People argue that's one reason why things get expensive sometimes is because they have to be because of everything with unions and everything of that nature. And then you also have just what happens with like how socialist is it going to be? So that becomes like
Yeah.
like a threat that happens big, in the early 1900s also. And they're important. I know New Jersey just passed standards now that the labor history has to be taught in social studies. Has to
Yeah.
be taught.
Look at that. Well, I guess the social studies, right,
Yeah, it's
aspect.
part of it.
So anyway, I thought that was kind of important, right? It gave birth to literally the modern labor movement. Okay, what's the next one we got here?
Spanish American War. So obviously this is big. 1898, but the main thing with Spanish American War is why it matters. Is that America basically gains an overseas territory and becomes this like major world power now because of this war. So you want to say when did America become an empire? This is really when that starts. I guess one could argue. And if you ever go into anything about the Spanish American War, Spain, United States fight a war, we were kind of like pushing this war to happen. Spain did not want to fight us because they knew it wasn't really gonna. They had no chance of really winning at this point. 1898, their power has really faded. America was a rising military power. Right, you all heard all like the main in Havana Harbor explodes. Spain is blamed for it. They're saying we had nothing to do with it. Turns out, years later, we find out they didn't have anything to do with it. Spanish American War is also a great example of yellow journalism, right? Like you had the whole war hawks and the peace doves going on at this time too. But basically, America fights Spain. We beat Spain. Cuba does not become a state, but does become kind of an America protectorate for a while, right? And but we get their basically their overseas empire, right? Puerto Rico. What else do we get from them? Everything basically in the
Well,
Pacific.
we also get the area where we have Guantanamo Bay, but
Yes.
and,
Yeah,
and the
that's what
deal,
I'm trying to say.
yeah, and the deal that comes through with that one is that we take a piece of Cuba and we say we're going to establish this naval base and we're going
Military
to
base
pay
there.
you for it. Yeah, we're going to pay
Yeah,
for it.
always gonna
Um,
have it.
and we do, and we send them this ridiculous amount every single year to this day. Actually, can you Google it? Like, it's like, how much do we send them? But I know there's a check that we send, basically to Cuba, and Cuba's like, we don't want your money. Like, we just want our land back. And yet every year it's like, no, no, here you go. Like Guantanamo Bay could stay here. It's legal because we signed this piece of paper, and here is our rent that we pay, and it's this ridiculous amount of money.
Well,
What is it?
it's the rent is actually $4,085.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So it was the originally 2000, yeah, 2000, and it's gone up with inflation, the $4,085.
Imagine for a piece of a country that they don't want to rent out to us.
Which crazy though, we've had it for so long too. You know what I mean?
But
Like
it's
even when
also
everything
offshore.
everything was going on. Yeah.
Yeah, which is good for, there's that little loophole of where does the Bill of Rights end? You know what I mean? Like, does it end on American soil? Which is why CIA and other things, whatever we're talking about, terrorists post 9/11, where they do interrogations and whatnot. So you hold them
Oh,
offshore, and it's not considered American soil.
yeah.
So you're
And that's
like, well, doesn't apply.
doesn't apply. And that's another reason why this, was one of these major events. We don't become a world empire, but it kind of becomes a little spot that we do so much with the war on terror. Even to this
Yeah.
day, there's still military base there. We're still doing, what we want to do there for the most part.
I always look at the Spanish American War as the United States stealing an empire. Prior to this, I mean, Britain is obviously the empire. I mean, you have Britain, you have Spain, which is kind of dying out as an empire in Europe during this time. But all these different nations are really imperializing throughout the world. And the United States kind of sitting back because we still have a Western frontier. And this is where the Frederick Jackson Turner thesis comes in, that the frontier is closed, that for the first time Americans can't go west and they can expand their markets. So, well, if we can't go west, maybe we need markets somewhere else. And we are so behind on this because the United States has been concentrating on expanding through manifest destiny and this ideology of going west and continuously gaining more land on this continent versus around the world. So while we were staying here and growing, everybody else is growing around the world. And we are so behind able here
Yeah.
that ultimately, with the Spanish American War, we steal Spain's empire. We
We
went
get
around.
Guam, which
Yep.
really then sets us up as a Pacific power. And really, without the Philippines, we start getting like the sugar cane, all those things, which
Yep.
just becomes really big in America. But also, that sets us down the path for what's going to happen like 40 years later, more
Well,
give
of
or
course.
take, with Pearl Harbor. When you're going to be that starts us as a rival really in the Pacific with another rising power, which is Japan. So it kind
Yep.
of puts all this in place. And another thing that's forgotten sometimes with the Spanish American War is this really launches the career of Teddy Roosevelt, who becomes
100%.
like he is. I think he's your favorite president. You always talk
It
about him.
is. He
And
is. He
I
is.
know they got that tattoo in a location we're not going to talk about of Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah.
But it really launched his career. His Rough Riders become legendary during this time. It really lays him on the path where he becomes vice president, really just to shut him up, and then McKinley's
Yeah.
killed and he becomes president. But this is really what Beacon puts his name on the map. Is the
Yep,
Spanish-American
yep.
War.
So I have my next one is 1924. Do you have anything before 1924?
I do. I have one that I think does have some relevance. Obviously, it's the Panama Canal. Like, you can't
Okay,
have
go.
the United States, opening the Panama Canal was a big thing because before this, the ships had to sail around South America, and what it does is basically connects Atlantic and Pacific oceans. And this was wanted to be built for a long time. Up until this, there's all these different points where they're going to build it. We're going to build it. These different countries. Finally, the United States kind of like forces Panama to get its independence from Colombia. We quickly negotiate canal rights, which actually expired in 1999. But what the canal does do is really shows American engineering, American influence, our intervention overall that we're going to get what we want. So it kind of makes this debate like, was it diplomacy or was it imperialism? Like, yeah, we were doing something that was going to help Panama and help a lot of people having this Panama Canal, but it also was going to help us a lot too with shipping, and also allows us to have a two water navy in the Atlantic and the
Yeah.
Pacific because we can send ships through. And ships have gotten so big now, but they still have to fit through the Panama Canal. You ever see there's like that much space, like a quarter of an inch,
Literally,
if
yeah,
that,
yeah, I see
right
pictures.
between going through. And there's always talk like, should we have given the canal rights back to Panama? Should we have kept it? Should we take them back again? That's always kind of like a debated issue. But it really does show like America, if we want something, particularly in that Western hemisphere, like what we talked about in the previous episode, we're going to do what we have to do to get it. Again, we're right or wrong. I'm not arguing that point, but that's kind of been like showing the history of it. And you really see that example with the Panama Canal.
Yeah, Panama Canal basically made the United States a global
Global
naval
power.
power, or at least
Yeah.
set us up for it. Yeah, because like
They
you
couldn't
said,
do
we
it
can
without if
move
that wasn't in
between
place. Yeah.
yeah, we can move easily, or well, easily, I guess, between the two major oceans. But it's how we got it that really
Yeah.
shows the the imperialism aspect of what's happening in America post Spanish American War, because you know Colombia ultimately controlled Panama. Like
Yeah.
Panama was part of Colombia,
And we did try and
and we
negotiate with Colombia first
yeah, we
because
tried to give them money, and they're like, we don't
they
want
were
your
like,
money.
no, we're not doing this. So
Yeah.
we're like, all right, then we're gonna have Panama break away from you, and then we'll just negotiate with them, which
Yeah.
is,
We'll help them get with their
that's,
independence movement. That's what
yeah,
we did. We
well, yeah,
basically helped Panama,
help. We're gonna help.
yes, gain independence, and then with by force. And then, the second Panama gained independence, Panama's like, "Okay, here you go. You could, blow up a piece of a continent and build this canal." So we really it just also not tricked because there was no tricking really, but it
No,
shows
everyone, yeah,
America flexing its muscle for,
yeah. They
early
Colombia
on.
knew exactly what we were doing, and we were just like, well, stop it. You know what I mean? If you
Yeah.
don't like it, stop it. And they were like, enjoy your canal.
Yeah.
But that's
And
pretty
then,
much what it was.
Jimmy Carter signs the rights back, off to Panama. But like I said, it's a point of contention for forever. It's like who controls who owns it.
If I think
But yeah,
we still protect it.
yeah,
So it's
there's
kind
definitely
of
deals with it.
there's definitely deals there. So I think the Panama runs it, the operation of it, but the United States still protects the canal, so there's still like a debate. Yeah,
Yeah, like think about it. If anybody closes the Panama Canal right now, who's stepping in? We're
yeah, yeah,
us.
yeah.
Like, yeah, we guarantee that. Yeah. I have one that kind of deals with World War One as well. I forgot about that one, and that is
Yeah,
the
let's not forget about World War One.
yeah, no, there's a lot of World War One, but the one that I thought was kind of important about World War One that does influence, though not just the United States, but it's America's action, but influences the world, and that is the Senate rejecting the Treaty of Versailles. I don't know if you had that one, but the United States steps in. Well, obviously, it helps. We're not going to say the United States won World War One. That's wrong. Does it maybe tip it in towards winning? Yeah, we could easily argue that, but the key here is that the Treaty of Versailles is rejected because Wilson refuses to include any Republicans into the process, right, of the peace process because he doesn't really like Republicans. But this is where the coalition would have been important because he kind of goes by himself, does his thing, and then he comes back, like, treaty's finished, and he says that it's his right, according to the Constitution, to create treaties. He goes, "As a president, that is my right." And I have to essentially what he says is he needs to present it to the Senate, and the Senate looks at it as, "No, no, we need to approve it. There's a difference." And he goes, "No, no, I have to present it." But needless to say, twice it goes for ratification of the Treaty of Versailles that ends World War One, and both times it does not get the majority. The final vote was 49-35. By this time, Wilson has had a stroke, traveling the country, trying to get people to pass. He went right to the people, like, we need to join the treaty, the League of Nations at the Treaty of Versailles. The key here was the League of Nations. Ultimately, that's what it
Yeah,
was. The
that's what it was.
Senate said,
That's what kept
yeah,
us out of it.
yeah, the Senate said we don't want the United States to join the League of Nations, and the reason for that is because it would tie American military to the whims of European powers. Because if there one becomes the aggressor, the other nations have to potentially step in. And the Senate said, well, only Congress could declare war, not some other power such as the League of Nations. So we can't send American soldiers because the League of Nations says that. It's only if our Congress says it. So they're like, we're not passing this. This is very important because historians argue that this American retreat into isolation is what directly contributes to essentially fascism
Yeah,
growing
yeah, the
unchecked
rise of
in,
Europe and what happens, yeah,
yeah,
the rise of fascism
1930s.
in Europe and what leads to ultimately World War II. That's why a lot of historians will argue really there was one world war, which is like a 20-year kind of ceasefire, right? That's kind of what the Treaty of Versailles was. Because remember, after World War One, the US was a financial powerhouse because Europe was destroyed. We were a global leader, but yet we back away and we're like, we're not getting involved in this Treaty of Versailles. So I always tell my students, it's kind of like the Justice League without Superman.
Yeah.
Like, then what do you really have? You have a guy who just looks like a bat and a guy who talks to fish.
Hey,
Awesome.
hey,
Well,
I like Batman.
how much is really gonna like yeah, but how much what are they really gonna do when like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
a big threat comes in? You're gonna throw a batarang at him?
yeah.
Awesome. Or do you want the guy that can, breathe a hurricane? So it's gonna be a little bit of a difference there.
Yeah. Do you have
And
anything else
you
for World War One?
well, really just the US getting involved in World War One,
Yeah.
like the Zimmerman telegram and why the US gets involved. But mostly because what you talked about before, because it pushes America gets put in a conflict and they emerge as a global power, but then they retreat after that,
Yeah.
which kind of sets the stage for some of the other events that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, I'm sure.
Imagine though they didn't. Like, what if the United States steps up, says, "Yeah, we're like what happens in the United Nations later on after World War II? We kind of take our place at the helm."
Yeah.
Um, and at that point, we have to share that power with the Soviet Union in
So, yeah,
1945,
which
right?
would not have happened in 1970, 1918.
1919,
Yeah.
1920. Yeah, that
Yeah.
wouldn't have happened. So, like, because Europe was shattered at the end of the Great War. So, like, what if the United States takes that mantle right there and then? Like, how does that
I don't
change?
know. Yeah. Even if
uh,
they did, I don't know if the public was for that.
No, they
Because
weren't.
there was still a lot of like we a lot of Americans feel like they were almost tricked into the war at point. Not that the Zimmerman telegram, was all real and stuff like that, but just like all the propaganda stuff, they felt they kind of got pulled in. A lot of Americans too, from what I read about it too, they weren't crazy about the Treaty of Versailles. They felt like it was kind of punishing Germany a bit too
Yeah.
much. Remember,
There's a
the
lot of
Germans were
Germans in
world
America.
yeah, the Germans of World War One were not the Nazis of World War Two. So
Yeah.
they were very there was a different like mentality. Yeah, a lot of Germans, American. Remember, there was talk even prior to that that America would enter World War One on the side with
The Axis
Germany.
powers. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There was a chance of that happening up until really the Germans. I mean, the Lusitania incident kind of like
Yeah.
destroyed that whole thing. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, it would have been different. Would have been it would definitely have changed things. I don't know if you see that in that rise of fascism in Europe. Probably if the League of Nations became what the United Nations became. I mean, United Nations has its problems too, but they could have it would have been very different probably if they followed those same mandates. There would have been some intervention probably in Italy, right?
Yeah.
With the Munich, and everything going on. Then with the Sudetenland, there could have been some more things, and who knows?
Yeah, I don't think we even would have gone to Sudetenland and any of that. You know what I mean? Like the United States would probably kept a check on that. But the US does get somewhat involved economically. There's the Dawes Act in between, and we're going a little
Yeah,
off topic, but obviously um Germany is the one that's taking all the blame and they have to pay the reparations. And then the United States passes the Dawes Act, which ultimately gives loans to Germany to help them stabilize their economy to repay their reparation loans. So it's like we're lending them money so they could repay us partially as well. But it did start putting it put the German economy back on the right path. And if it wasn't for the Great Depression, that kind of destroys all that. Because when the Great Depression steps in, the Dawes Act basically becomes void because we're like, we're not giving you money because we don't have
yeah,
money. Depression just screwed everything up. But if there wasn't a Great Depression, I feel like the United States would have actually helped Germany, potentially the Weimar Republic, get out of that economic hole, which would have potentially stifled the rise of fascism.
yeah. Well,
Again, these are all what if.
there was a real fear that Germany was going to fall to communism too. They
Yeah,
saw what
in
happened in
Germany.
Russia. They
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
what
yeah.
happened. Yeah, they saw what happened to Russia, but the Soviet Union. They didn't want that to happen to Germany. So that's one reason they were popping up. Really pushing democracy and everything else there. To those fears were that Red Scare was still going on.
Yeah. All right, what else do you have that's around this time? My next one is the 19th Amendment.
Yeah, that's all I have to 1920. So we'll
Yeah,
go with
yeah.
that.
So, I mean, this is obviously important. We're talking about decades of organizing for women's suffrage, right? Um, Seneca Falls Convention happened in 1848, and now we're like almost 100 years later. What's also crazy here is that America's built on this equality for everyone, right? All men, are created equal, and there's the argument of historians of whether that meant mankind or men. It likely meant men. However, that interpretation has changed over the years to mankind. But still, essentially, women fought to get their rights to be full citizens from the beginning of the creation of the United States, right until 1920. And what we kind of touched upon, I feel like a little bit last episode, is that a lot of states granted women the right to vote individually as states within state elections, but there was no amendment that made this a federal, um,
Didn't make it
federal
law.
law.
Yeah, it didn't make it
Yeah,
law. And it was
yeah,
basically the biggest expansion of voting rights in U.S. history. Because
yeah,
yes, you had other amendments before that gave African Americans the right to vote and giving just like all men rights to vote and stuff like that. But really, it doesn't become huge until you have more than 50% of the population, which is women, right, being able to vote.
yeah.
So the 19th Amendment changes all of that.
Yeah. You also have the idea that it needed 36 states to ratify, and Tennessee became the final state to do it, but it was only because the guy, I forgot the guy's name, but the one guy changed his vote. He was a no, and then like last minute, he's like, "Ah, screw it, yes," and boom. It was just like
Yeah,
by
it just
such a
happened. Yeah,
small margin because there's so many male members of Congress that were against this because they're like women. The excuse was one of the excuses was that women technically do get to vote. They get to vote through their husbands. Like, when their
yeah, that
husbands
was it.
vote, their husbands represent their wives as well. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
No, that's not how it works. That's not supposed to be
Yeah.
how it works. Well, then it was always all that they're just going to vote for who they find more charming, which is basically the 1920s version of saying who's more
Yeah.
attractive,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Which is like, no, like that's probably not,
No, no, not how that
yeah,
works.
that's not how it's gonna work either. But I always found it interesting too, or just like shocking. I've always talked to students about like this was 1920, like women have had the right to vote for 120, 106 years. Like that's it.
That's it.
Like the
Yeah.
airplane has been around longer.
That's crazy. And talk about, like, just restricting, or allowing, and my next one I had, which is what I was gonna jump to before, was the Immigration Act of 1924, the, Johnson, Reed Act, which is the first like, really comprehensive immigration act, and the United States is built on this idea that we're a nation of immigrants, but this act shows you that we're a nation of immigrants based on our whims of who we decide is allowed to come in. So, when you put on the news today and you're looking at American immigration policies and you're like, oh, America's excluding immigrants and we are essentially deporting immigrants, blah, 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 all that good stuff. That's truly happening. But this is not new by any
No,
means.
no.
America has been excluding people for a long time. And the Immigration Act of 1924 established these quotas. So essentially, there was a fear that there was too many
Peop
people coming
Too
in
many
from
immigrants
Asia.
coming over, yeah.
Yep, and from Eastern Europe. And that also included Italy. Like, we didn't even Italy was considered, like, not so great. So therefore, the United States steps in and creates these quotas where I think they looked at 1890 census was the last one. They're like, "All right, that's when, like, things shifted." And they're like, "Who is coming in here that we don't want?" And ultimately, what it really fell, the big axe fell on the Asian population. And we essentially said, Asians are not allowed to come to the United States." And then we limited severely the quotas of all Eastern Europeans in favor of Western Europeans.
Because a lot
So,
of East Europeans were worried they were gonna be communist.
yes, the idea was that anarchy and communism was coming in. And essentially for the next 40 years, until like 65, the United States is limiting who comes to the United States. A lot of really cool political cartoons about this, by the way, if you guys
Oh,
Google it.
yeah.
But yeah, one of the most consequential and racially explicit pieces of American
Oh, it was
legislation.
totally based on, yeah, because it was they say this is how many Asians can come here, this is how many
Yeah.
Italians can come here, so it's totally based on race, yeah,
Yeah. It was it was
100%.
pretty intense. But it just shows you that some things don't change, but it also changes the makeup of the United States, So talking about events that made America, this changes the makeup of who becomes an American for essentially half of the 20th century. Yeah. Next one I have is the Great Depression. I don't know if you have anything, but my next one is Social
Well,
Security. Like, there's so many things in Great Depression and New Deal, but like the Social Security aspect is,
yeah, I think the great thing to focus on with the Great Depression is just how it changed like the mentality, right? Because before this, it was the kind of government was supposed to be hands off for a lot of aspects. Yeah, they're
yeah,
doing like the immigration I was talking about, the kind of day to day life they're not going to get involved with. And then obviously with the Great Depression comes, it's like, what is the government doing now to help people? They're not just going
yeah,
to put in a lot of these. We're talking about how they don't want socialism, but and communism. But they kind of bring in some particularly socialist ideas like social security, like welfare, come into action now because of the Great Depression. And it's really what starts to pave for the presidency, the executive branch, to really start getting a lot more power, right? So that's
yeah.
why when I used to teach AP Gov, we always talked about was really with the Great Depression and with the New Deal was the beginning of the executive branch getting a lot more power than it was ever really supposed to have. And that's where it fundamentally changed America and what it suddenly becomes as the president of the United States becoming like the de facto, what he used to say he's the most powerful person in the world. And this is one of the reasons why is because of the more powers coming through to that executive branch because of the Great Depression. People were looking to the government. What are you going to do to help us now? And they put in these
Well,
things like Social
that's the big thing.
Security,
Yeah.
welfare, things like that go into place. And the president is the one, and this FDR is the one spearheading that.
And that's, you kind of touched upon this too. Is now there's a different expectations from the
Yes.
ground up. For people now look up to the government. Like, what is the government going to do? And that's the big,
Shift. That's the
debate.
shift. Yeah.
Yeah, but as the big debate here is what is true purpose of government, right? To
Yeah.
keep us safe. Like, what is the purpose? And I
But
feel
I mean,
like
what
the
is
New Deal
keeping us safe?
programs.
Is just protecting us from outside threats, or also
Yes.
keeping us financially safe. You know what I
Yes.
mean? Making
Like,
sure
that
that
becomes
if I
addition.
lose a job, that I have money to feed myself and my family.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility is that?
And if you're conservative, you wanna kinda reset, go be pre-Great Depression when you're like, "No, no, you need to use your own wits," right? Pick yourself up by your bootstraps kinda thing versus look to the government for help.
What do they call it? Rugged individualism.
Yes, yes.
That was like the big term,
That was
rugged
Hoover's
individualism.
thing, yeah.
Yes.
Um, what we're looking at here essentially is, first of all, is the most popular Social Security is by far the most popular federal program. I mean, no
Yeah.
one touches it. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican, if you are a Democrat, every politician knows
Well,
that if you
no
try
one.
to
Yeah,
touch that,
you're
your
done.
political
Yeah.
career is over.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it's never going to happen because older people are the growing force now in the United States, particularly now,
yeah,
right? So with the growing of America is what they call it, and they're the ones who typically do go out and vote because they have the time to go and vote, right? So you can argue that too. So they're going to vote. Americans vote with their wallets, so they're going to vote for their Social Security checks, and
yeah.
that's not going anywhere.
History is long, complicated, and most of us don't have time for it. And that's where I come in. I'm Peter Zablocki, historian, professor, and slightly obsessed storyteller. Every single day, I dig up forgotten stories from the past. And then I squeeze them into short, punchy episodes you can finish before your coffee gets cold. Big history, tiny time commitment. This is History Shorts. New episodes every day. Part of the History Shorts Network, available wherever you get your podcast.
Summer is here. At Orderly Meds, we know this time is a reminder that life is full of new beginnings. Whether you're celebrating the nice weather, starting a new chapter, planning a vacation, or simply looking ahead to what's next, this season can be the perfect time to invest in yourself and your health. If you've struggled with weight loss and are curious about GLP-1 medications, Orderly Meds can help you learn about your options. Through a simple virtual process, you can connect with licensed medical professionals who can determine whether treatment may be appropriate for you. Getting started is fast, convenient, and happens online from the comfort of home. This summer, consider a new approach to feeling your best. Visit orderlymeds.com/podcast to learn more. That's orderlymeds.com/podcast. orderlymeds.com/podcast. Because every new season is an opportunity to take the next step forward. Compounded medications are not FDA approved. Eligibility required and determined by a licensed provider. Individual results may vary. See website for details.
So my next big one is obviously Pearl Harbor,
Yeah.
because I feel like that's a starting point into the United States becoming a global
Well,
power.
that's the one morning that changed everything.
Yeah. So you could say pre-Pearl Harbor, post-Pearl Harbor. So obviously we know what Pearl Harbor is about. We know we're attacked by Japan. We know that this pushes us into World War II. So really, when we're talking about Pearl Harbor, it's about the
Well,
significance of that event and the effects of that event, right? So why does that change America?
well, because we go from kind of this reluctant participant in the Second World War to fully committed global power, right? Massive enlistment, massive, you have the draft, industrial mobilization. It's really the last time America formally declared war, right? Congress declared war. So this is the last time that it's formally happened, where the economy shifted, right? They were not making cars and refrigerators, now they're making tanks and bombs. You had a huge sense of national unity. That's why all those video games are all based on this, right? They talk about all the era when America got along. That was always the 1940s and stuff like that, the 50s. And it really cements the United States as a superpower status, without a doubt, especially emerging after the war.
Yeah. No, this starts it in, and you mentioned that reluctant participant because
Where you break
again,
the isolationism.
there's a lot of books written about this, whether FDR purposely, whether he knew about Pearl Harbor because he really wanted to get us into the war or not. We could argue back and forth. There's evidence for either
They
side
definitely
that
knew that there was gonna be an attack. I don't think anyone expected Pearl Harbor. I think it was more the
yeah,
Philippines. That's where they expected it to be. But they're like, let's let an attack happen, and stuff like that. But Pearl Harbor was more of a shock than anything else.
yeah, and yeah, US never goes back to isolationism after this event. um, to this day. I mean, literally. And if you think
Yeah,
about it, it's not, I mean, there's people that are still alive that were alive during that time. Like this isn't, it's a long time ago, but it's not,
it's over 80 years. Yeah, but it's not that long. Like
yeah. There are
it's
people that
still
are still
there.
alive. Yeah. Not many, but
No, hell, the Arizona is still leaking oil.
yeah, I know.
That's one of
I
those things
really
too.
want to, one of these days, I kind of want to maybe, I interviewed on the other podcast, Ruben was the author. He went out in early 2000s and found every last doughboy from World War One. Right? I think it was The Last Doughboys was his book. And he was like, I'm gonna go across the United States and find every surviving World War One veteran. And he did. And there were well, all of them or above 100 years old. And he interviewed them and great book, great stories. And it makes me wonder, like, we're drawn upon that time with World War II veterans.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
there's soon it'll probably be possible for me to get on a plane and just visit every surviving World War II veteran because they're dwindling away. All right, after this one, I kinda have a huge jump. I go right to the Cuban Missile Crisis. What do you have?
Oh really? All right. I had one in between that I
Which
think
one?
was important. I had D-Day. I put D-Day on there.
Okay. Well,
It's the largest, amphibious invasion in history. If it fails, the war could extend it on for years. It's going to strengthen Nazi Germany, could alter Europe permanently. So, and it succeeds because of the deception, obviously, the cooperation, but just the massive logistics. Could the war have been won without D-Day? Maybe. You can make those arguments, but it definitely would
yeah,
have lasted a lot longer.
I
And I
agree.
just think the importance of D-Day having this massive invasion begins the liberation of Europe, at least from the Western side. I know the Soviets are fighting in Stalingrad, and then they're forcing their way from the east to Berlin and through Germany. But for the Western part of it, this is like a major event.
Well, I also think it's important because we needed to step in because the Soviet Union was
Well,
doing a
yeah,
little too well for our comfort.
and now it's part of it too. So if they kind of started to imagine if Soviets just sweep all the way across,
Oh my
and I
goodness.
mean it sets up the Cold War. So it's obviously a major event.
Yeah, 100%. And the 50s, I mean, what do we have about
Well, you have the
50s?
Marshall Plan. I mean, that's big. That's
Oh,
in
the Marshall Plan
47.
is big. Yeah, because that shows the United States, Marshall Plan essentially gives billions, right? Is it
13
bill?
billion to rebuild
Yeah.
Europe in
Uh,
1947 money.
Yeah, to rebuild Europe, but it also puts all of Western Europe in American camp, right? It says, "Look,
Yeah.
we're gonna guarantee your safety, we're gonna guarantee the safety of the global economy. The United States is gonna be the big brother and watch over everybody." And what's
All you have to
happening
do is
now
don't become communist. Yeah. That's basically
yes,
what's the whole deal.
yeah, and what's happening now is America is kinda stepping back and saying, "Alright, you guys can take care of yourselves now." And, like, Europe is
Yeah.
like, Wait, what?" And the
It's-
same premise with NATO. I mean, NATO is more military, but Marshall Plan was more economic, but it
We
was
don't
the
have
same
NATO
idea.
without Marshall Plan. Yeah. This basically shows that economic power becomes diplomatic power, right? So, was this generosity or was it strategy? It was definitely a bit of both. Like these were our allies in World War II, so we want to help them out, but also just a strategy to position themselves for the next big war, whether that was,
Yeah.
probably going to be against the Soviet Union. or whatever it was going to, the confidence was going to be there, but also just to like put us in a good place economically also. Because who's
Yeah.
going to build all that stuff? Who's going to all the contracts? Who's going to have like the business? Who's going to have like all that profit when Europe starts to boom? It's going to be there.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens in Japan. We do the same thing with Japan.
Oh yeah. Well, Japan is rebuilt mostly because of the Korean War, because we needed to ship. It was
It's
going to
very
take
narrow.
too long to ship things from the U.S., so we're like, all right, we'll just build stuff here because we could just ship it across the pond, or the strait. It's not even the pond, but um, yeah, we definitely build up Japan's economy, and then Japan booms, and then there's a fear of Japan, right? I remember in the early '80s it was like Japan's economy is so strong, like what is happening? Like all of these books and thriller movies about how Japan is becoming too powerful. Um, Nakatomi Plaza. I mean, come on, right?
Good
So
stuff.
anyway, do you have anything else before we get to Cuban Missile?
One more. Sorry, I got a
All right,
couple in the
go.
50s here. About Brown versus Board of Education. Come on, Pete. You
I
can't
do,
hang me
but you
to it.
know what? I rolled that in with
Civil
March
rights.
on Washington, death of JFK, and the Civil Rights Act of '64, which I think, like,
Yeah, but
boom.
this is kind of before that. This kind of like,
I
because
guess the
what it does is,
beginning.
yeah, because well, it overturns separate but equal. You
Yes,
know what I mean? It's
true,
overturns
true.
Plessy versus Ferguson, which is big. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And it kind of lays the legal foundation for the civil rights movement. Basically allows children,
introduces JFK. I mean, JFK,
yeah,
Jesus, introduces MLK
MLK to
into.
the thing. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
and like the hidden story with all this too is people think, oh, this happened. That's it. Segregation was over. No, this is 1954. So there's a lot more to happen. So implementation was very slow. It was heavily resisted, particularly obviously in like the southern states. Um, But this debate was just the most important Supreme Court decision ever because it's the first time Supreme Court kind of ruled on the side of a minority, right?
yeah.
Normally they're always side like in Plessy versus Ferguson, they side with the majority here, So this is the first time you're ever really getting this, and it's a major step in that civil rights movement.
You know what's
So you talk
interesting
about
about
it can
this?
branch into that.
Yeah, the loophole though here was, and you kind of touched upon this, the loophole was that the federal government, Congress said that schools needed to desegregate, and I quote, with all deliberate speed, meaning
Yeah,
they did not give them a
like
date
yeah,
by which they had to desegregate. And it was some schools were 1970s they were in. It wasn't until the busing system was introduced to force busing upon school systems that would bus black kids and white kids, to the same school versus, well, you go to this school here because it's closer to you, and you go to that school, it's still segregated because they're ultimately the Congress, you might say, was so afraid of the backlash of this that just the sheer fact that they passed this law that they did not give it a date by which it should be done, which is
obviously,
crazy.
yeah. When you get
Well,
around to it,
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, like for me, like I kind of looped that in with 63 March in Washington, one of the most quoted speeches ever by King. But I feel like it all kind of comes in place because the March on Washington '63, it shows the unity behind African Americans because there's a lot of white people that are involved in this as well. And then you have JFK gets assassinated, and because JFK was through his brother Bobby Kennedy was very much pro civil rights, his death ultimately pushes through the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which essentially ends discrimination, right? In the United States. But the Civil Rights
legally,
Act of
yeah, yeah.
legally, yeah, the Civil Rights Act of '64 was introduced. The Civil Rights Act was introduced by Kennedy, and it was kind of just like being bounced around in Congress.
It probably would have
And
passed if he wasn't assassinated.
yeah, then he gets assassinated, and now there's this sentiment of, "Oh, for Kennedy," and then LBJ kind of pushes it through because, again, LBJ was a bull in the china shop. So he pushes it through, and we have one of the most consequential legislations for civil rights
Yes.
ever, '64. But then there's the idea of, well, does that necessarily cover discrimination against voting? Which leads to Selma with MLK, which again leads to the Voting Rights Act of '65. So I would say Brown versus Board of Education, the March on Washington in '63, the Civil Rights Act of '64, and the Voting Rights Act of '65 are the pinnacle of civil rights legislation and victories in the 20th century. But then I feel like the civil rights movement shifts, right? Because then you have the breaking of the civil rights movement, you have the more radical younger group. You have the Black Power. the Black Panthers. MLK is almost being viewed as by a lot of the younger African Americans as like the pawn of the white government. You have the splintering of the civil rights movement. And then you have the assassination of King in 68, which I think is very important because that more or less signals the end of the civil rights movement, for better or for worse, right? Like it's just
In
kind
that
of
era, yeah,
abandoned.
in that era,
Yeah,
without a doubt,
just
yeah.
kind of abandoned. Yeah.
That's a whole other sum of topics, obviously. But I like that we can, yeah, grouping them all together in that time span, that like 8 year span when there was
Yeah.
this, a lot going on. It's
Yeah, to
socially
say
in
the
the
least.
United States. Yeah,
Yeah.
a lot of
Did
turmoil.
we take that class together in college
Which one?
about civil rights? I took it with Professor Marshall. I don't know if you were in that class.
I don't think so.
I don't know, it was 20 years ago, Tom, I don't know. It's been
That
a
was a while
while.
ago. That was a while ago.
Um, so, okay, so besides that, I mean, I did have the Cuban Missile Crisis, which I'm sure you had as well, right? Because that's the closest we've ever come to World War III.
It's the World War III, and it kind of puts Kennedy on the map, right? So you're talking about how
Yes.
what his death does later on without having Kennedy there. And during that time period, who knows what could have happened? Because he was definitely had his strong morals there, his strong set point that I'm not invading Cuba, but also I'm not going to let these missiles get to Cuba, those glass components to get to Cuba.
Yeah.
You know,
And we have to mention the fact that Kennedy, as glorified as he is today, he was not doing all that great when he was in office.
no, he wasn't well particularly liked at the time.
Received. Yeah,
Yes,
no, yeah.
for many
Until the
reasons. Yeah.
Cuban Missile Crisis. That's when people are like, "All right, he
Well,
can
he
do
showed
it, that
leadership.
young
That's what he
guy."
said. Like, what makes great leaders? Like, does the times make the leader, or does the leader make the times? That whole like debate. So,
Yeah.
like, he kind of rose up at that occasion. And he had and his brother helped too, having those backdoor channels, able to get in touch with Khrushchev. And it puts in that place now. There is actually, well, I don't know if there still is now, but there's like the
The
phone that,
red telephone, yeah.
that they could actually call the Kremlin. They could communicate directly because there was no direct communications, which is really crazy. Like these two powers, nuclear powers that are already chance one miscommunication could lead to World War III, and they had no way of directly communicating with each other.
Yeah, that is
You know what
crazy.
I mean? So it's like, it doesn't make sense. I remember telling that to the students back in the day, and they'd be like, "What? They couldn't just call them?" Like, well, no, for real, there was no cell phones. They couldn't do that, but no, there was no like, you know, Kennedy and Khrushchev couldn't be texting each other emojis and trying to figure it out. That's just not what they were doing back then. But
I
yeah, but
wonder
it,
if,
it changed
talking
things.
about text do you think Putin and, Trump text each other?
I know they do call each other. They said at times
Yeah,
like unplanned into discussing certain things. So who knows?
yeah. Who
Who
knows?
knows?
Alright, what's the
Hopefully.
next one you have?
I'm skipping, but I'm still in the 60s, at the end of the 60s, basically. And this was more of like a America for the world type of thing. So the Apollo 11 moon landing, right?
Yeah.
1969. Definitely a major event. Hey, why are you going, eh? You don't think that's a major
Because, like,
event in
is it
American history?
changing America?
Yeah, of
It
course it
does.
did.
It ends the space race.
Oh, it
Okay.
was more designing the space race. For the first time in all of human history, no one walked another world. Now someone's walking another world. And yes,
And
it
they're
did happen.
American. And
Yeah,
they're
and
American.
yeah, we're American. So America did it. Okay, no one else has flags on the moon. All right, come on, man. All right, but no, but it shows a Cold War competition, right? Technology, innovation, national ambition, and again, they're doing this for Kennedy too, because he's the one that said they're going to do it before the decade ends. So they want
Yeah.
to like kind of force it to happen. And you really think about it, like your cell phone has more technology than what they use to fly to the moon.
Yeah. And I
So
also, if since you're on that topic of cell phones, I feel like this is a pioneer of the fact that we have cell phones, right? This is the precursor to that because of so much money is spent for research to get into space, for to create better satellite systems, to create better ways to get things into space. I feel like all of that ultimately somewhere down the line leads to Starlink, and the ability for us
yeah,
to have the
this
technology that we have today.
the satellites, everything. Yeah, being able to do this podcast. See, without the moon landing, we couldn't do this podcast, Peter.
Yeah,
So then what?
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, keep on putting it down. All right.
I
I'm
mean,
gonna
next one
have
I had was Nixon's resignation. I mean, Watergate. It essentially damages American trust in government, right? Like for a long time.
well, even to this day, I would say that's why we again when AP Gov used to always talk about Watergate, that was the preachers of it is before Watergate, for the most part, you kind of trust what the government said. And
Yeah,
after Watergate, the American people just automatically distrust whatever the government says.
yeah.
Watergate, you can throw Vietnam obviously in there too.
Well, but also why we want transparency,
Yeah.
accountability, right? Which is why today people are like, show us the
Epstein
Epstein
files.
files. Like
which we
we
just
want
got
account.
flagged because we just mentioned Epstein files. So
Yeah, probably.
they're going to be
But
out
do you
of
know what I mean?
endorsement.
But this is where it stems from. It's like, no, no, we're done. We want it. We want that accountability, and most importantly, we want that transparency. That's the key, because of from this point forward, from Watergate on, like we expect that from our government, because here is Nixon, cheating his way into office and then lying about it, and then trying to cover it up by cutting tape, and eventually coming out and quitting, right? It's also a
Yeah.
thing. No one's ever done that. And
No, no,
before or
resigned.
after, right? Who steps down from that? I mean, he did, right? But
Was kicked out of office.
yeah,
You know what I
he
mean?
could have gone to jail.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But he
Imagine.
steps down and then Ford pardons him, and
Yeah,
that's basically just does
that's
that.
the end
Yeah.
of Ford. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that was a big one for me. And then I don't know. I mean, Vietnam is huge because same premise. Vietnam ends Since Vietnam, we have not had a draft. It was an extremely unpopular war. It's the first war that is quote unquote lost by the United States, which shows that it doesn't matter how much money or military might we might have, that might still not be enough. And for decades prior to that, since World War II, the idea was like we had atomic bomb, H bomb, nuclear weapons. We are so powerful militarily that we can win anything and defeat anything. And then you go to Vietnam, and it kind of puts a damper on that. It shows that maybe military prowess is not all that it takes
Yeah.
to win. And that also kind of shows a little bit of fear for Americans, because it's like, well, if that doesn't win, then like, are we really invincible? Like as we are perceived or perceive ourselves to be? I mean, yeah, Vietnam definitely puts a damper on kind of American invincibility, you might say.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. It just made everyone second guess. And also, like, how far were we willing to go? Like, could we have just dropped nuclear bombs on Vietnam?
Yeah.
Yeah, but obviously that wasn't going to happen. Thank goodness that didn't happen. But like, it was
Yeah.
kind of, they want to keep it contained, and then they kind of question, well, Vietnam did eventually fall to communism, but like the rest of Southeast Asia didn't, and the rest of the world didn't. So does
Domino didn't work.
Donald
Yeah,
Day
domino effect.
really make sense? You know what I mean? Like, are there really going to be like this, Russia, that's Soviets or communists taking over Washington D.C.? Is that really something that's going to happen? And people kind of just are like, yeah, no, I don't really think so. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
They
then
kind of
what?
changed
Within
that
like
mindset.
5 years after falling, we start signing, economic deals with them, and now they make
Well, that's the
T-shirts
thing.
for
I
us.
think they started looking kind of like the Marshall Plan. It was
Yeah,
more like we can use our economic strength and use that almost as a weapon for diplomacy, but also military to get kind of what we want. And we kind of like shift, you know, these economies, because communism fails because they can't compete with capitalism, right? But that's with basically the stuff that people want. So we give them the money and invested capital in there so they can have kind of the best of both worlds in a lot of ways, or at least make it look that way, you
yeah,
know, and become partners with us, and we can make money. They can make money. Even these bloodthirsty dictators or whatever, or these communists, whatever you want to call them, are still going to want to make money. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So, all right, let's make money together.
When I look at the '80s, there's a lot of global events that are important, but I don't know how much of them are where the United States kinda is involved, but I don't think it changes the United States, or we are involved enough, right? I mean, a lot of it, like Soviet Union invades Afghanistan in the late '70s, which leads to the economic collapse in Soviet Union, which
Yeah, the
ultimately
fall of
leads to
Berlin Wall, but we're not
Gorbachev.
really involved that other than
Yeah,
Reagan. I
that's
guess
not
you can talk
us.
about Reaganomics or Reagan competing
Yeah, but
with this, like the Star Wars programs. I wouldn't say that's a major thing, but just kind of it kind of sums up the '80s. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like doing all that
Yeah, the
stuff. Yeah,
United
right.
States, like, kind of flexes its muscles while the Soviet Union is deteriorating.
Yes.
And
Well, we're kind of getting away from the top 10 here too. We're kind of like going in all
yeah, yeah, yeah.
directions. So you're right. Yeah. So the '80s, there's a lot that goes on in the '80s. We're not, but like if you want to go a top 10, there's not really that
There's
major
not much. No.
event during that time.
Do you
With
have
the
anything
certain,
in the '90s? I don't.
I mean, the '90s too. There's events. You can talk about Bill Clinton. You can talk about like, yeah,
LA
obviously
riot,
this
the LA
the
riots.
LA
Yeah.
riots, which was major. You can talk about Bill Clinton with the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but did that really fundamentally
I
change?
don't
If
think that
anything, it
changed
just
America.
raises like tabloid news and stuff about, you can make those types of arguments. But the
Yeah.
big event from that point happens right after the '90s, I do
Yeah.
think. So
So let's get to the big one. Go.
the big one obviously is going to be September 11th attacks.
Yeah.
These kind of transform foreign policy, security of daily life. You can make the argument it's the most significant event of the 21st century. It probably changed America more than any event since World War II. You can make the
Yeah.
argument because we are a little bit older, And a lot of this teacher, some of the younger teachers now weren't even alive during that time, or were
Yeah.
like one or two, but all the none of the students were. So that's like obviously you know, a major thing. So they don't remember what it was, but it did change things. If you just go to the airport now, the
Yeah.
travel got fundamentally changed because of September 11th. Department of Homeland Security is created because of September 11th, and that terrorist attack on New York City, Washington D.C.
But also this framework of war on terror. We're
What does that
technically
really mean?
always at
Yeah,
war. Yeah,
yeah,
we're at war. We're at constant war, essentially, from that point forward. You
yeah.
know,
I mean,
like
we had a 20 war in Afghanistan, Iraq, everything that's going on with Iran. You can kind of ties directly into with
war on terror,
trying to prevent another 9/11 from
terrorist attack.
happening. Yeah.
And so it almost like puts America in a constant state of war. Not in the traditional sense of World War II, but in that sense of like we are always on our toes, just kind of, making sure that there is no other terrorist attacks. But yeah, definitely fundamentally
They changed
changes the
America.
United
They
States.
changed
It definitely
without
changed
without a
America,
doubt.
which is crazy that that was 25 years ago.
Yes, because like I said, we were
We were in
what
college.
we were in college. I guess we were 19,
Yeah,
or
freshman year of
1920.
college.
So I
Yeah.
definitely remember it very vividly, and that's something that we can talk about. But that'll be things we tell our grandkids because we were alive during that major event. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? For better or for
And
worse.
if we, I mean, this one pretty much ends our list, I think. But if we are doing this podcast in the 10 years, I think you would have to say, well, you would have to say the election of Barack Obama,
Like
right?
the election of Barack Obama changed the first African American president.
Yep.
Obviously, that you're gonna
Uh,
have to see the COVID-19 pandemic
yep.
change
100%.
things. Um, I would
Election
say
of Trump.
Trump, yeah, he's
I mean, that
well,
starts a populist
the
movement of
yeah,
Make America
the
MAGA.
2016 election too.
Yeah.
This in the election of Trump, he's everyone thought Hillary was going to win.
Yep. No, like these are, yeah. So those would be the three that, like, if you, because that's the thing about historians and history. It's like, when does history start? Right?
Yeah,
Some people
how
say
long?
that, yeah, there's, and there's argument about this, like that there is a cutoff point because if you're too close to the event, you're not seeing it well enough yet. It's as if you're reading a book so close you can't really like distinguish the letters. Um, so I mean, Barack Obama's election is probably far enough.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but
Well, his library just
COVID-19 is
opened,
not.
so that's how you
Yeah,
can create it. Yeah.
yeah, COVID-19
Once,
is not. We're still living the, effects of that. So,
yeah, and the
yeah,
Trump presidency is still going on basically, but really
literally.
all of those. I know we're running out of time here, but I just want to do one honorable mention that I think
Yeah.
was important that we talked about before. That really sums up. You don't have some of those events we just talked about without the Citizens United versus FEC Supreme Court case from 2010, which probably most people don't know about. But it's basically is one of the strongest cases for this because it changed how modern day political campaigns are funded, and it basically said that corporations have the same rights as people, and because of that, they can contribute whatever they want to a individual they want to win office. So basically, corporations, labor unions, advocacy groups have First Amendment rights to spend as much money as they want on political speech, and that's why you're seeing these individuals and the political parties really gives more power to Republicans and Democrats. The third parties kind of fall off these unless they're independently funded, they just can't keep up, and this is what really creates this like massive campaign spending that you see during the election time, not just for president, but for Congress and Senate and even local elections. Sometimes it's because of that these corporations can give as much as they want. There's no cap whatsoever.
Hmm. Who owns
So
who? Yeah.
that's what it is, and that's what they're saying. This rule that it's their political speech is protected, so essentially means that they're people, and because of that, you know, they can just these super PACs emerge. You probably heard that around political time. They can raise unlimited money, spend unlimited money, and they can do this. They can coordinate as long as they don't officially coordinate with the campaigns, but they do have advisors. This is how we would recommend you to spend this, spend this money, and just changes everything. Changes
Hmm.
everything.
I mean, if we're at honorable mentions, the interstate highway system of 56. I
Okay,
mean,
yeah.
right, 41,000 miles of highway, but I would say it transforms American life, leads to suburbs, right? Suburbs, trucking industry, um, fast food, moving food from one area to another. The interstate highway system allows people to move further away from their jobs. It stretches Americans, but at the same time connecting Americans. And also there's a military aspect to it as well, because it's designed to move troops in times of war. But you know, at some point or another, every single person that probably is listening to this has hopped on an interstate highway system to move from one place to another. The other one I had was the internet, obviously, but it's not like, I don't know. I
course,
mean, World
debate
Wide
like
Web
when it
made
really
public
start and stuff like that. But
91.
yeah,
Yeah,
the right. I think that more happened late '90s, early 2000s, like the rise of the internet.
yeah. But it
Became
officially
big.
went live in 91, but it didn't really start becoming popular till mid 90s. So, yeah, I mean, that's all I got,
Yeah,
right? This
whatever.
was
Well,
there
there's
we missed
200.
though.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, we had
250 years
250
of
years
America.
in history reduced to 20 moments. You
Yeah.
probably left out 20 very easily. You know what I mean?
Easy.
So yeah,
Well, what I
that's
found difficult about this whole
certainly
process, I don't know about you, but it was like when I was looking at it, they were like big moments. I'm like World War
yeah,
II. I'm like, no, I got to narrow that down. Great Depression. No, I have to narrow that down. You know what I mean? Like it was about finding the needle in the haystack. Like this idea of like, all right, I think World War II is important, obviously, but like, what about World War II makes World War II important?
yeah,
Like that's what I kept on trying to say to myself as I was looking through these. It's like narrow it down. Like you tell your students when they try to write a research paper, nope, narrow it down. Nope, narrow it down, narrow it down, kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So if you
yeah.
guys want to find us, you could definitely find us on Facebook. That's your best bet. You could find us on Facebook. You could message us with any suggestions. You could also find us, hopefully you're already watching this on YouTube, where we have different shorter clips of these longer episodes, as well as these long episodes once a month. And wherever you're listening to this on your podcast app, we are available on all podcast platforms. So yeah, feel free to message us on Facebook and visit us with any suggestions you might have. We kind of already have some ideas of where we want to go with our next one. So yeah,
Yeah, but
we're
until
good to
then,
go.
just keep on, keep on asking us questions and stuff like that, and keep on talking history.
And sharing this content.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys. And have an awesome, I guess, month. And we'll talk to you guys again next month.
Take it easy, everyone.